Hello, everyone. My name is Ishai Levin, and I follow the automotive, the software, and the space industries at Baron Capital. Our next speaker is Gwynne Shotwell, the president and COO of SpaceX. SpaceX has been disrupting the space launch industry with its reusable rockets. In 2023 alone, the company launched close to 100 times, nearly matching all other launch providers combined. It is also deploying an Internet from Space offering called Starlink, now serving millions of users globally. As president and COO, Gwynne's role is to make the SpaceX vision a reality. Under her leadership, the company has grown significantly from a small startup to the leading space company. Please welcome Gwynne Shotwell.
All stations verify, ready for launch. FTS.
FTS go. Props
Go. AVI.
AVI's go.
GNC.
GNC go.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
SpaceX's go for spacewalk operations.
Nice to see you, Ron. How are you?
I love you.
Love you too. Hey, everybody. I'm so glad it's not raining.
Me too. So welcome, Gwynne. This is your second time here,
Yes.
and must feel really cool working for someone who's so low-key. Never see him anymore. So here, by the way, this is a private company, SpaceX. You can't just buy stock in the stock market, and yet there's probably not a day that I don't read an article about SpaceX. It's unbelievable. So it's because of you. And when we started investing, I was speaking with a CFO the other night of the launch business. There's two businesses, launch and Starlink satellites. And I was speaking with her the other night, and I was saying, we were talking about growth, and she said, Ron, when you started to invest in 2017, we had linear growth. We now have exponential growth. So growth is really accelerating right now. And the things that we're doing are just remarkable. The people clamor to try to own stock. So you never read about this. It's the first page of the New York Times saying that in order to own stock in SpaceX, you have to know someone. And if you know someone, then they'll do you a favor. Then they rip you off with a really high fee. With us, you get to invest in it at the same price we invest in it without the high fees. At least we don't think they're high. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I asked Ishay to join me too, and I sent Gwynne topics that I wanted to talk about, and there are a couple topics that she said that she didn't think were that good to talk about, so I left them off.
Or my team said it wouldn't be useful for me
Yeah.
to talk on the subject.
Yeah, and oh, by the way, one more thing. I read that you called him Starman, and so I started calling him Starman too. And he was supposed to come this afternoon, but he's doing other stuff.
He's tied up.
Right.
He's pretty tied up.
So he couldn't. So what I was interested in is that, first of all, Mechazilla. Where'd you get a name like that? that Godzilla or Mechazilla?
I think it's like a mechanical Godzilla. I'm pretty sure Elon came up with the name too. He is really quite brilliant in many things, but also in naming.
Do you want to talk about Godzilla just for a second?
Sure.
About Mechazilla?
Yep. So, did you all see the capture of the Super Heavy booster? Yeah, that was extraordinary. My team said it wasn't going to work, so they were sandbaggers, obviously. We've got a next launch coming up, hopefully on Tuesday, knock on wood. We're going to try to catch it again. We did have some issues, obviously. You can understand this is a very complex system, and the things that we're trying to do are very difficult. We're going to try to repeat that success on Tuesday. So fingers crossed, you know, all the good things that go into that. But let me tell you just a little bit about Starship and how Starship is really going to change the world. And when I say the world, I don't just mean Earth. I mean Earth and the moon and Mars.
And also, I want to interrupt for just 1 second. So I really jumped ahead. I shouldn't have done that. But basically, the idea here is that the competitive advantage we have in Starship is that, or in SpaceX rather, is that we launch rockets and we can use them again. No one else can do that. So everyone else sends up a rocket one time, costs $100, $200 million, and then it's gone. It burns up. And we use it, we take it up like an airplane, and then we bring it back down again, and then we use it over and over again. And this Mechazilla, what that is that when we went out to visit the facility and we saw this structure, and it catches a rocket when it lands with its arms, catches it and holds it. And the reason for it is that then when it lands, it's not only we use it again, but all we do is refuel it and send it up again. Anyway, I'm sorry.
You don't need me, Ron. You're so good at this.
You do it.
You probably know more than I do. Yeah, but so Starship is going to change the world, both on planet Earth and off. And the difference between Starship and this other extraordinary product that we have called Falcon 9, is both the first stage and the second stage of Starship is reusable. So the big breakthrough, as Ron mentioned, was reusability. You know, Elon founded this company in 2022 with a singular purpose and sole vision to build the transportation systems necessary to put people on other planets. And his vision is, you know, currently on Mars, but we're all starting to look beyond Mars as well. And if you think about current day rockets, they're one use, both the first stage and the second stage. So first stage gets dumped in the ocean, second stage generally gets dumped on orbit, creating havoc for the satellites that we have on orbit, that everybody has on orbit. So Starship will change everything. The cost of getting people and cargo to orbit will drop dramatically because we're not throwing out the rocket. Neither part. Falcon first stage comes back, second stage we bring back, but it burns up. The fairing we return, but there are still parts that you basically spend $10 million on a part of a rocket, and you know it's single use only, so it's ridiculously expensive. In addition, Starship is so big that the concept of how we put things in space, how people travel in space, is totally different. Starship has the ability, because the second stage is reusable, you go to orbit, you let the satellite go. If the satellite's not working, maybe you bring it back into the Starship bay, have technicians work on it. If it's still not working, bring it home. Work it, fix it on the ground, and then relaunch it, because launch should be that inexpensive when the only real cost of the launch is going to be the fuel. So now back to Mechazilla. The thing that separates this Starship is both stages are reusable, as I mentioned, and Mechazilla is necessary because basically it's there right before launch. First stage and second stage connected, fly to orbit. Well, first stage comes back, suborbital. Second stage, Starship goes on to orbit, does its job. First stage comes back, gets caught, gently down on the launch mount, and then it can move over and pick up another second stage that's sitting there, another Starship, bring it up, put it on, refuel, and go. So this is the vehicle and the system that will make flying rockets much more like flying airplanes. Think about what life would be like if aircraft were one-time use. You know, you could fly here from Austin, Texas, and then they toss the aircraft. You know, life would be very different.
So what are the issues as far as using it over and over again? So at one point we want to launch 2 or 3 a day when we're going to have this long-term mission to get to Mars. I mean, how hard is it to get permission to do that?
Permissions are a different thing. Technology is easy. Physics is easy, people are hard. And regulator people are the hardest.
And why are the regulators so hard, and how are we going to deal with that?
Well, regulations, if you think about SpaceX and what we've done in this industry, a big year for a space company is 10 launches a year, maybe 12 launches a year. We flew 96 last year. We'll do something over 130 launches this year. The regulatory regime and the rules associated with that were built for that 10 launch a year per company, not 100 or 130 or 160. And so if you launch 10 times a year, let's say roughly, let's make it easy, once a month, the regulatory system has time to license that launch. It's got at least a month before the next one. I launch Falcon every 2 or 2.5 days. And the regs just weren't built to keep up with that.
So how do you get that to change? How do you get that to change?
Well, regs take 5 years to change. So we'll be working through waivers. They're called guidance papers to try to operationalize the regulatory regime. You know, we never complain about regulation. It's not that there is regulation. It's that regulation in the U.S., maybe globally, maybe not China, but maybe everywhere else, regulation is slowing technology down. It's not helping, it's slowing. And all we ask is regulate industries, make them safe, make them right, make them fair, but you gotta go faster, much faster.
Is anyone else trying to land rockets over and over again and use them over and over again?
China has had some success in that, and there are other organizations in the US that are also trying to land rockets.
We're now doing more satellite business instead of just launching other people's satellites. We're making them ourselves.
Yes, we make a lot of satellites, 50 or 60 satellites a week we build. I mean, I've grown up in this industry, by the way. I started my aerospace career in 1988. My children say it was just after the Ice Age. And in that time frame, you know, one satellite launch per year per company was a big deal, and it would take 10 years to develop that satellite. We developed the Starlink system. We're on we call it version 2, but it's probably like 3.5. We started the program in 2015. We launched in 2019, and we're on version 3, roughly 3.5. We call it version 2 now, and we build 60 satellites a week.
And we're doing this also for Starshield.
Starshield is a very interesting area.
Starshield, let me explain what that is.
Yeah, so Starlink is the commercial product that we have. Who has Starlink? Wow, you guys need to buy Starlink. It's the best internet available.
How could you not own Starlink?
I have 7 of them. I have one on my car, in fact, because I live in Central Texas, and I used to drop calls when I was chatting with Elon or in meetings with Elon, and I knew that was a loser. So, so I got a Mini and put it on ski racks on my Model S Tesla. So I don't drop calls with Elon anymore. It's way better. It's way better.
So yeah. Starshield.
So Starshield is basically a derivative of the commercial product Starlink for government use, government applications.
So you once told me that one of the only things that's preventing my grandchildren from speaking Mandarin is SpaceX.
Oh, no, that was very bold of me.
Probably true. But the idea about Starshield, that protects our nation?
It does some mission areas. It is certainly not the entire suite of things that are important for national security.
But it's a very important element of it?
I think it's very important.
And the other satellites that we're building for mass use are what?
So we have the Starlink system, which is broadband, available globally where the beams will go down any place on the globe, but we still have licenses to get. I think we're in 114 countries and markets with about 100 or 120 to go. So that is broadband. In your car, on your RV, in your home, camping, that's Starlink. Starshield is a derivative of that, again, for government use. with slightly different kind of concepts employed. And then we also have started launching what we call our direct-to-cell business. Some people call it direct-to-device, where you actually, your cell phone is communicating with low Earth orbiting satellites. And right now, we'll be rolling that out very quickly, probably within the next month or so. And initially, it will be very light data and messaging, text messaging. And as we continue to evolve the product and the satellite system, it will do more.
Gwen, can you talk about, you mentioned kind of a good space company before was able to do 10 launches. We do 100 or more, one satellite a year. We do a lot more than that, thousands. Why? How do we get there? What, can anyone really catch up, and how?
Well, I hope others can catch up, right? It's good. Competition is good for industries. You guys should want competition. It keeps us tight. You know, it keeps us very focused. But at least on launch and both satellite production and deployment, we are ahead. It will be hard to catch us on launch because I actually think launch is harder than satellites. And that is not to diss my Starlink team by any stretch. But launches are hard. You know, it's this million pounds of explosion that you have to keep controlled and directed in the right way so that the rocket goes up. It's going to be hard to catch us, but I certainly hope people try.
But the crux is reusability, or is it the learning algorithm, or
sorry.
like?
Yeah. So there's a couple of elements of magic to SpaceX. First of all, Elon started it at exactly the right time. So timing was very important in our success, for sure. Elon is magic sauce for this company as well. He's not only kind of technology driven, but he's run companies, very successful companies, and he focuses on the technology in concert with the business itself. So we've made technology decisions that ended up being very good for business. It wasn't like the business people on this side and the tech folks on this side. We've been a very integrated team since the beginning. And frankly, I have 15,000 of the finest employees on planet Earth. So I think that, yeah, they're amazing.
And then you mentioned that we, with Starship, potentially will get to a cost of a flight with just fuel.
Largely just fuel.
So I think if I go back, I think in the shuttle, a cost per kilo to low Earth orbit was around $50,000. We reduce it by 90% with Falcon 9, potentially reduce it by another 90%. Well, what does it mean for all of us if we can really get costs so much lower with space launch?
Well, what we're hoping to do with the work that we're doing is to allow ordinary people to go to space. I want to go to the moon. I think Elon wants to retire on Mars. I'm not interested in Mars. I don't like camping. And I think it will be a really long time till Mars is nice enough. Probably not in my lifetime. But hopefully we're also setting so we want people to fly to other planets, to go to the moon, to go to Mars, and hopefully, maybe, well, certainly not this century, maybe hopefully next century, our great-grandchildren could fly to other planets beyond our solar system and find sentient life somewhere else. That, to me, is the coolest part of what we're doing. Can you imagine going and meeting other people? Whatever, yeah, sentient beings.
So how many planets do you think there are that are the size of Earth, that are the same distance from the sun, that have nitrogen and hydrogen and oxygen?
So I just read last week, actually, that I think 20% of star systems have planets in what they call the habitable zone. So it's billions of potential, more than billions, because I think there's 1 billion trillion star systems. And roughly 20% of those would have planets. I'm not saying that they all have life, certainly not evolved, to where we are. Some might have evolved further than us.
So 14 billion years ago, the Big Bang, 13.5 billion years ago, the first light, and then Earth is 4 billion years old.
Yes.
And humanity here has only been 20, 30, 40,000 years?
I think slightly older than that. There's actually quite a bit of disagreement in that, but roughly. Yep. But you have to match. By the way, I do believe that there are other sentient beings. I certainly hope it's not just us that feels both egotistical and frightening, at the same time. So I do believe that there is other life. I don't think they've gotten here yet.
So
We
if you-
can argue about that
if
over a
you go
glass
to
of wine.
Museum of Natural, yeah, maybe. In fact, I think I know one. So the Museum of Natural History, when you go there in the dinosaur room in front of it, there's 5 boxes or 6 boxes that are glass, and you look into them and it says that each one of these, this represents an extinction event on planet Earth of all life for 6 different times, which is what Elon is talking about how he wants to have another place
To live.
if this happens, or to figure out what we can do with our spaceships to prevent that from happening again. So you obviously think that this is potentially to happen again?
I think it's inevitable. I think it's the cycle of planets. And luckily, those cycles are in millions of years, tens of millions of years,
So even if
hundreds of
you're-
millions of years. So I probably am not going to catch it on mine, but hopefully progeny, well, not hopefully. Hopefully I will have children, grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren. But, at some point it is likely to happen. Just define the period of time of likelihood. And so I think it's really important for humans to proliferate and to go to Mars and then go to Proxima and then wherever the next nearest star system is with a habitable planet.
So the competitive advantage, why other people can't easily do what we do, is that we can use the rockets over and over again, and they keep getting better and better and better. And I look at rockets, just like a tube, looks like a tube to me. What's so complicated about it? And by the way, you talked also about how Starship is so big. How big? How big is it? It's the biggest rocket ever?
Yes. It's very big.
30
It's very
stories?
big. It's a technical term. It's gigantic.
So-
It looks like, have you gone for a launch? Have
Yeah.
you? You've been, right?
I
It
went-
looks like a high-rise New York office building lifting off the ground. It's gigantic.
It's like 30 or 40 stories tall.
Yes.
So take a 30 or 40-story building in New York and put rockets on it and expect it to fly.
Yeah. Remembering that rocket engines are just controlling a giant explosion in the chamber and directing the exhaust this way so that the rocket goes this way.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
So you're an engineer too. Do you know? I mean, Elon. I read about, or I'm told about these skip meetings he has, and every now and then you tell me, well, he comes here and he gets a bunch of people in the room, and then he says that we should do this, and people just look at themselves and they say, well, how can we do that? And then he leaves, and you say, well, if he says you can do it, you can do it, and you figure out how to do it. So he has these skip meetings. They call them skip meetings.
Skip levels.
So tell what those are. And he just goes into a meeting.
So I think skip level meetings are a really important management technique for any company. What you want to do is make sure your direct reports are not withholding information or preventing bad news from rising. And it's natural tendency, right? It's not like these employees are bad. It's just that, I feel like my job is to solve problems that people that work for me were not able to solve themselves. It's fine, they can't all solve all the problems, so they come to me, and then if I can't solve a problem, I'll send it to Elon, and I try not to do that. And you don't like sharing bad news, but the earlier you share bad news, the better, because then you have more time to solve the problem, right? And so skip levels are important because sometimes people are a little more candid or a little more worried about that thing, even if their manager thinks we're going to get it and they're going to solve the problem. It's just nice to know as early as possible. So skip levels are very important. The other reason, by the way, not only to seek information and truth and real risk to a project, timeline, or technology, I think it's really important to meet the folks that, that work for you. If you think about 15,000 people, I couldn't meet 15,000 people every year. So there are lots of people that I've never seen, never said hi to. And this is a really, I think, valuable opportunity to meet people. And skip levels don't just have to be one level. In fact, I love to meet with our technicians that are building our rockets and spaceships, bring them into a room and chat with them in groups just to make sure things are going well. Because the further you get away from the visionary, and the pulse of the company, I think the easier it is to kind of move off track. It's kind of human nature. And so I think it's really important to tighten that up and make sure everybody understands what we're doing, why we're doing it, and it keeps people quite focused.
So one of your directors is a friend of Elon's from college, and he's on board of SpaceX and of Tesla. And he was telling me he goes to these meetings, and 15 people would come to a meeting with the supervisors not invited, but the people who do the work in all these different areas. If one person means software and hardware and chips and whatever, and each one would have a separate discipline. And Elon would start off calling one of these 15 people, calling on him and saying, so what do you do? And a broad question initially, and they keep drilling down until he gets to this point where the person can't answer the question. He says, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that. And it was clear to everyone that Elon knows more about the discipline than the person who's performing the tasks. Is that accurate?
In many areas. He is extraordinary, by the way. I love working for Elon. I love working for Elon. I don't have to work. I don't have to work, and I love working for Elon.
And the problems that you face are problems like what? What goes wrong? What doesn't work right? I mean, everything?
Everything goes wrong. I refer to myself continuously as the president of parking and potties, because those are things that matter deeply to people. And, sometimes things go wrong with potties, and I get an email or a text, hey, and then I'll find the right facility person. That hasn't happened very recently, but within a couple of years, that's happened. And parking is meaningful to people. We operate outside of a couple of areas. We operate in, highly dense areas, and people don't want to have to walk a mile to get to the building. They want to park and be efficient and get to the job. So it could be something as simple and mundane as that. It could also be, we're going to be incredibly late for a customer's launch, and their business really needs to fly that satellite, and we got to do it by the end of the year because of their stock, or by the end of the quarter. And so, those are big things, and you try to work with the team and do the right thing, the thing that's most fair and right for the employees, the customers, and all the customers.
So if we have now 7,000 satellites?
We've launched over 7,000 satellites. They're just under 7,000, I think, on station operating.
And we cover the whole world?
Globally.
110 countries?
114, I think, as of this morning. I think Mila said we were at 114.
And so if someone else comes along and wants to do what we're doing, well, satellite, well, I guess you have geostationary, but if you have low Earth orbital satellites, they keep going around. And so how does anyone, if we're already covering everyone and we're doing business with everyone, how does someone else compete against us for that? So how do you compete against us for the launch? How do you compete against us for a satellite in a smaller market when you're just starting off? And then we just come up with something like this laser net mesh. How does that come about? How can someone do that? And how can they develop that? This is satellites communicating with each other.
Through these little laser terminals. That's magic to me. I'm a mechanical engineer. That's
how does that work? I mean,
I don't know. You can communicate over wires. You can communicate through the atmosphere. You can communicate through light. To me, it actually is magic. I joke about it, but it's not a field that I understand particularly well. Maybe.
And that sound that's traveling at the speed of light?
No, it's basically it's the energy waves. Yeah. So, but there was a lot. You just asked like 5 questions, and I'm over 60, so I'm going to forget each one of those. So how could there be competition? Space is a huge place, right? If you think about planet Earth, if you put 7,000 cars on the surface of the Earth and they were driving around fast, obviously orbital velocity is much faster than a car goes, but that's pretty sparse, right? That's not a lot, 7,000 things on the surface of the Earth. And every time you increase altitude, that shell is bigger and bigger. So even though 7,000 satellites sounds like a lot, Space is big, and there are lots of layers. If you're thinking about like highways or freeways that are stacked, there are lots of stacking that you can do. So not only another constellation be at a different altitude, and they're flying at a different altitude. So
How far apart do they have to be so they don't crash into each other?
I think it depends on the technology of the satellite and how you're operating it, but you probably want to be 10 or 20 kilometers at least, altitude-wise. And
that's
a
our
little
shell.
bit further.
That's the shell.
And then a little bit further, I think, when you're in the same shell. But there's plenty of room. Space is big. But really the key to prevent satellites from mechanically interfering with each other is to be very candid about where your satellite is, and if you're going to move it, tell the community where you are and where you're going to go, so that everybody can make sure that there's not going to be a traffic jam or a collision at worst case. So communication is really the key and probably the hardest thing to do to coordinate physically these satellites, because some nations don't want to talk about where their satellites are. I know we have some satellites, not SpaceX, but the United States has some satellites that they probably don't want to talk about where they are. So communication is key in constellation management. But that's the physical space, competition for physical space. There's physical space, we just need to coordinate and be fair. As far as business goes, there are close to 8 billion people on the planet. We're serving not quite 5 million people yet. But the market is huge.
5 million out of 8 billion, and 30% of those 8 billion don't have communication, don't have broadband.
The market is gigantic. And I would love to say SpaceX is going to, or Starlink and SpaceX is going to serve all of them. There will be competition. I think there's plenty of room in this industry. Plenty of room for competition.
And so when they're starting off, they're going to have to make a big front-end investment in order to compete with us. And we've already invested. We already have all those satellites up there. It's going to be very burdensome, very hard for someone to compete broadly with us. They can do specialized. They have a special telescope or a special radar. But to be broad communications like us, it's going to be really hard.
Be hard, not impossible. A lot of CapEx.
And the longer they wait, the more CapEx.
Yes.
And our satellites we keep replacing our satellites, and the satellites keep getting more and more powerful.
That is correct.
And are there limits on that? Or do we have to change?
There'll be physical size limits, which physics will dictate how much power you can use on the satellite. The limit on the chips and the beams, this is magic again, just like the laser links are magic to this mechanical engineer's brain. How we communicate, our antennas, our transmit and our receive antennas seems a little magic to me as well. But the cycle of the increased capacity is basically on the same cycle as chipsets, which is like double capability every 2 years, or 4x every 2 years? Moore's law.
So the reason this laser link is really important is that when you're flying all over the place and you're over an area that's not friendly to us, that's not friendly to the person who's sending it or receiving it, then you don't want to bring it down to the ground. You don't want to go up and down into that area. All of a sudden when you go up, then the laser takes it all over the place to all these different satellites. Is that correct?
Yes, but I think really the beauty of the laser mesh is that the transmission speed is much better as you go satellite to satellite through the laser link. When you come down to the ground network, there are lots of switches and you lose a lot of time. Latency goes way up as you come to the ground and then either bounce back up or come to the ground, then go to fiber to a POP or something else. So the laser link is just a very efficient way to take data from one user in one part of the world to wherever that piece of data is supposed to go, either in another part of the world. Next door probably isn't as efficient. Fiber is really good for that kind of thing. But it's just much more efficient.
And that's at the speed of light.
Yes.
The speed of light, so we can get it anywhere.
Yes.
Super fast.
Super fast.
Super fast.
In fact, that's the goal, right? Is to figure out a space transportation system that is the speed of light. I think physicists can envision getting 1/10 or so the speed of light, which would make the closest star system Proxima Centauri. I think that's 4.3 light years away. So it will be 43 years to get to that planet that might have sentient life. That's still a long time. I don't know anybody that wants to be in a very luxurious ship.
Unless you can travel backwards in time, or forwards.
I think wormholes would be super cool. Like just get there in an hour or two. So we got to find some wormholes between here and
Folds and-
Proxima.
yeah, right.
You know, or folding. Yes.
Yeah.
If we are talking about Starlink, maybe we can talk a little bit more about direct-to-device, why it might be interesting, and then on aviation, maritime, things that I think a lot of us think about Starlink as a residential solution. What other kind of use case around Starlink?
So because of the fact that this constellation is in orbit above Earth, it can reach any place on the planet. It can physically can do that. Now, again, we don't operate in every market because you have to go country by country and get permission to do so. But think about where there are no cell towers, no 5G, middle of the ocean is a perfect example of this. Starlink is a great answer to communication, maritime communication. You could go to GEO satellites, of course, but the trip time is much longer. GEO's roughly 10 times further away, so the data is roughly 10x slower, and it's two-way, so it's actually kind of 20x slower. Maritime is great. Aircraft, like how many of us go fly in an airplane and there's supposed to be crappy Wi-Fi, and you get on the plane and they're like, Wi-Fi's down. You're like,
Terrible.
shoot.
Yeah.
You're
How
on the
much
plane.
better is Starlink versus kind of the
You
existing?
can't tell the difference between like real commercial broadband on the ground versus in aircraft with Starlink. It's completely transparent. We have a 737 that flies between Los Angeles and Brownsville, Texas, because we have so much work going between Hawthorne and South Texas, which is where we're building and launching Starship right now. And we have Starlink, of course, on the plane, and so 150 or so SpaceX employees are diligently working, VPNing on Teams calls or Zoom calls, all of them on the plane, and it's pretty transparent.
And then connecting to the question on the kind of evolution of technology.
Yes.
Today, Starlink that we see is already amazing compared to everything else,
Yes.
but it's probably the worst Starlink we'll ever see, right? Like the next generation. will
Next
be-
generation will have smaller beams, more capacity per beam, lower latency. Yeah,
So we'll provide even better service.
even better. You know, it would be like instead of having, well, none of you have Starlink, which I really am chastising you for, but if you did have it, if you just had multiple dishes, you could get, you know, gigabit per second speed. And what we'll do is instead of people having to have multiple dishes, we'll just improve the satellite signal and the receive signal, and you'll have gigabit, 2 gigabit per second speed. Like, no, I don't think you need more than that. Certainly not in a home, not even on an airplane.
I have it at Vail, and I have it in Long Island at our house. So I do have Starlink so far. I want it more places. And one of the places that I'm really interested in having it is we have a NetJet. You can't go to all these different places that we want to go to visit companies if you're flying commercial, so we have NetJet. And I have been complaining for 2 years and about NetJets, and supposedly we're moving forward. And how come it never completed? We got United Airlines. And once one airplane gets it, everyone's got to get it, because if you're flying from California to New York, you're not going to fly Delta if you get it on United, and United has it and they don't. So once one person gets it, the competitor has to get it. So you just got United.
Yeah, so we have United, we have Qatar Airways, we have Air France, we have Hawaiian. We're screaming on the airline business. It's just such a great product. And that's, by the way, that's really the lesson learned. It's not about marketing, not about sales. If you have a truly great product, people will buy it. People want it, and they will buy it. And so that's very typical of Elon and his companies. He just wants to build an amazing product so that people want to use it. And it's got to make people's lives better.
I think we talked about launch and Starlink.
Yes.
Is there any other kind of things that is under your development that worth mentioning?
I think just derivatives of that capability. For instance, Starlink, a constellation around planet Earth. We want to go build settlements on Mars. Well, in this day and age, you're not going to send people to Mars and have them not be able to communicate on the surface, right? So you need a Mars link. You need a Starlink constellation around Mars. And then certainly those people are going to want to communicate back, to Mother Earth, right? With their families and their friends that didn't want to hop on the ship and go camping on Mars. And so there'll be the communication system between Earth and Mars.
Moonlander, right? Like ISS, deorbiting. There's a lot of other things, I think.
And they're all kind of derivatives, actually.
Gotcha.
They're all derivatives, right? And by the way, Starship is really a replacement. It's obsoletes Falcon 9 and the Dragon capsule. Now, we're not shutting down Falcon. We are not shutting down Dragon. We'll be flying that for 6 to 8 more years. But ultimately, people are going to want to fly on Starship. It's bigger, it's more comfortable, it will be less expensive, and we will have flown it so many more times. We just passed 400 launches on Falcon, and I would not be surprised if we fly 400 Starship launches in the next 4 years.
400 Starship? Wow.
Yes. Yes, we want to fly it a lot. I have a lot of satellites to fly, Ron.
So we should open up for questions in a couple minutes. But when we're talking about, Starship and about the communication satellites, then I was reading that you were in Brazil. You trekked all the way into the jungle.
And I had the pleasure and opportunity, frankly, honor, we flew into Manaus and got on a boat and took a 2-hour boat ride down the Amazon River and brought Starlink to this school that had never, these children had never seen the internet, had never been connected. And we watched videos. They did a call with Elon. And it was my favorite day of work ever. I think I posted on my X account. I got hugged, like I'm such a mommy. I love my children. I want grandchildren. My children are not participating in my vision yet. So I got a room full of Brazilian school kids. I got hugs from all of them, and they were so excited about Starlink, and they knew Elon somehow, which was amazing. And that was my best day at work. My absolute best day at work was that day.
But again, we only have 5 million people so far,
Right.
customers, and there's 2.5 billion people, and we don't have anyone really competing against us so far.
They're coming. They're coming. We'll see how they do. As I said earlier, I really hope that someone else is successful. It'll keep us sharp. We don't want to get complacent and turn into a dudgy company.
We definitely don't want to be dungy.
Don't want to be dudgy.
Do you want to open it or?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Ready for questions.
You mentioned that regulation is hard and technology is easy. Now that Elon Musk has taken a role in the government, specifically the Department of Government Efficiency, will the regulation be easier?
I think the hope, by the way, is with this administration and this committee and probably others, I think everyone is starting to recognize in all industries that regulation really needs to be reinvented. And so I certainly hope, I probably spend more than half my time working regulatory issues. And I would love to be spending that time, meeting with my welders and meeting with the folks building Starlinks and Starships. So it's certainly the hope that we can figure out together how we make the regulatory organizations more efficient, make the regulations more efficient, and frankly, better. Not just faster, but better.
How do you do that?
It's hard. It's actually going to be quite hard. You need to really make sure you don't focus on the steps that are generally in regulation. You really want to focus on the outcome. You want Starship to be very safe. So there are simple things to do to make Starship not hurt people. You fly from a coastal area and you don't fly over people, not highly populated people. You know where the vehicle is, and if it looks like it's gonna head down into a populated area, you blow it up, right? These are very simple things, and yet the regulation for launch is, thousands of pages if you were to read all the details and all the things that go into it. So simplifying, focusing on what's really important, and sticking to that. Don't go off on tangents and science projects. Interesting, rockets are fascinating. But really stick to the one thing that matters, the one thing that you're trying to regulate for, and that is to make sure you don't hurt people.
Do we do the examiners who are in charge of writing these regulations, or the people who are in charge of those people? Or do we actually try to get something, a national type of system instead of a state system or a regional system?
The process to do new rules is supposed to involve interested parties, but it takes 5 years to make a new reg. In fact, Starship is licensed under Part 4. Sorry, you're going to start eye-watering. No, we're licensed under Part 450. Falcon is licensed under a different regulatory regime. I could not bring Dragon, this capsule that has gone to space, carried over 50 folks. I could not get a license for Dragon to re-enter on Part 450. So you can imagine the struggle we have with Starship. It's bigger. We'll hopefully have more, and we're still trying to bring it in. So you fundamentally have to break down the current reg and figure out what's important, and only build a reg that's readable. No one's going to read thousands of pages, right? 5 pages. Figure out how to do it in 5 pages, then everybody reads it, everybody understands it, and we can all move forward together quickly.
So when I think about Elon having a role, it seems to me that what is most likely for him to try to reduce costs and improve regulations is trying to get, have some oversight, to have some people here who can come up with sensible rules.
These fundamentals, yep.
Right, that's one. And number two, to reduce costs in operations of defense, for example, instead of having this cost-plus regimen, to make it where you bid like we do for the systems, instead of saying, okay, here's what you get, you spend it, and you get 12% off the top. So we incent people to take longer and cost more than if they just were here. We're saying, okay, you're going to get $2 billion or $3 billion, and if you can make a profit on it, great. If you can't, too bad.
Yeah. I have not been shy about my disdain for the cost-plus contracting regime that the government employs, less now than before. But think about you're to buy a computer online, and you say, I want to buy that computer, and they respond back saying, okay, we will build it for you, we will ship it to you, and then when you get it, we'll tell you what the final price is. Like, well, shouldn't you know what the price is? And even
That's cost plus.
That's cost plus. And by the way, if they screwed it up and they dropped it while they were manufacturing it and they have to get new parts, you're going to get charged for that too. Like, it is totally the wrong incentive for organizations to be effective and efficient with cost plus contracting. By the way, my compatriots in other companies hate me for saying that, but it doesn't matter. I think part of SpaceX's secret sauce and success has been when we say we're going to do something for this price, we never do it on time. We're very sorry about that. We are always late, but we always do what we say we're going to do, every time. And we do it for the price that we said.
But the other guys are late, and the stuff doesn't work. Half of it doesn't work, and the fee is several times what you thought it was going to be. Right?
You said it. They can hate you.
Okay, let's go up. Number 7.
Hi. Thank you for what you're doing for humanity. Obviously, this is an amazing business. It seems you're on the trajectory to be one of the most, if not the most dominant monopolies in the history of mankind as a business.
Don't use the word monopoly.
Okay, well, yes. And I know you're supposed to say you have tons of competition and they're coming. We get it.
It's not a planned monopoly,
Yeah.
right? If our competitors could get it together.
Totally. Elon, like most things he does very intelligently, is getting involved politically. How often do you think about nationalization risk, like far in the future, given the fact that Starlink has become more important in conflict zones, in war, and sort of related to that, what do you envision the sovereign regime to be when you guys finally do get to Mars?
That's a fascinating question, actually. Hopefully, it's a very low regulatory environment.
Except that you're immigrants.
I mean, very good. You know, you get to start from scratch, so we should put some really brilliant minds on what society looks like on Mars. Yeah, hopefully we do a really good job there. As far as nationalization goes, you know, we work for the government in so many ways. The government is an extraordinary customer from us, both the Department of Defense as well as NASA. I think we're NASA's largest contractor. NASA is our largest customer, or at least last time I looked, they were. We are NASA's customer. We actually pay NASA to do some work for us, and we also do some technology development and partnerships. So our relationship with NASA is really extraordinary. And so, by the way, the news these days is we have $22 billion worth of government contracts. We earned that. We bid it. We were the lowest price, best bidder. We won, and we execute. Like, it's not a bad thing to serve the US government with great capability and products. So nationalization, look, if we are in a conflict and the government needs Starlink, more capacity, we are not gonna say, no, actually we'd rather have the country get overrun. Nah, we wanna keep our customer base. Like, it's just not gonna happen. Like, if the government needs it, the government will get what they need. Just like always for us, despite news reports.
Number 5.
Hi, thank you for taking the question. You seem to really love your job. So just asking about the people, how do you maintain the culture with the level of growth? And how would you just describe the culture and the development at SpaceX over the past decade or so?
So I get asked this question a lot, and I answer it very similarly, and I hope I'm answering it correctly. It's really hard to pull that apart, but there are elements that I think hold true to this. First of all, our vision and where we're going is very clear. You know, Starlink might seem like a side project. It's not a side project. It's necessary once we get to Mars that there's, as I mentioned, a communication system. Our vision is to build the systems necessary to build settlements, successful, thriving settlements for humans on other planets. Not deviated. Like, I'll never forget my first meeting with Elon. He's talking about going to Mars, and I'm gosh, you know, people didn't talk about going to Mars in 2002. Not like sane people. And this was his passion. We have to ensure that humanity survives, and we need a risk management plan for people.
From the time he was in college.
Yes, but I met him in 2002, so that's when I started. So single focus, vision. Where are we headed? And that keeps people pretty tightly aligned. Then the next thing, so that's first and foremost. Second, hire the best people. Not the best people that you can, the best people. If you can't fill that role, don't fill it. Don't compromise on that. Our employees, I say it every time I possibly can, I love my job because I work with 15,000 extraordinary people of all shapes and sizes, all technical areas. You know, it's the best place to work, frankly. You don't want to work at a company where, you know, people are slow and stodgy. Like, it's very energizing and very motivated to work with really smart people. So that's number 2. And then the third, for sure, is set really crazy goals. Like, what seems impossible, set that as a goal, because it keeps people moving really fast. You've hired the right people. They're motivated. They want to do really good work. And give them a really hard job and let them run. And I think that's why we have maintained, well, frankly, we've gotten faster with time, right? The other things, we have a very vocal population. I call them mouthy. I want mouthy employees. I can't solve problems that I don't know about. I really want to hear where we're screwing it up. That's really important. So we have a very aggressive feedback culture. I want to hear what's going wrong. If someone's super helpful, please say thank you, pat them on the back. If someone wasn't particularly helpful, let them know. They probably didn't know they weren't helpful. and they probably didn't know they were getting in your way. Just be very vocal, very honest, respectful. But I would say that's our culture, super hard charging, hard moving, smart. You see a lot of smiles. Everybody's in SpaceX t-shirts and gear as well. Like, people are very proud about working there, which makes me really happy.
I love when something's accomplished and everyone goes crazy.
Going bananas, yeah. That is a benefit, by the way. It's something that we can celebrate, like 3 times a week we're launching. That's a huge celebration. And I think as entrepreneurs think about starting companies, you want to find moments to rally around, and launches are great. I'm not saying go in the launch startup business. I don't think it's very good, but find those rally points. It's really motivating for the teams to get together and hug each other and cry.
Well, launch is good for SpaceX, not good for us.
Okay, we have 1 minute left, so number 3.
The low Earth orbit satellite systems in the earliest days were all financial flops. Iridium in the first iteration failed. Globalstar, the same. Teledesic really never got off the ground, literally. You had European systems as well. So you're in a really challenging area that had failure after failure after failure, and you're finding a way to make it work. So in terms of going forward, you're a private company. You're not obligated to tell us anything about the financial performance. However, can you add a little color? What's the kind of return on investment for your different businesses? You've got to actually make it work. Obviously, you're growing, so you're getting revenue and ideally a profit. But can you give us any kind of color to help bring that to life?
So we're going to make some money on Starlink this year. I can say that. We've had quarters of making money in Starlink in the past. I think we've been successful. First of all, the chip technology has developed to the point where it's easier to be successful now. I credit my team as well, extraordinary team of engineers and techs and folks building the satellites, and incredible technology, actually. And then we own launch. So that is also kind of a helper in making sure our low Earth orbit system is successful. So that's that piece. I'm not going to talk about our financials. I think the future is incredibly bright. I think we were chatting with an investor, came in 2018, and I think we're 5 or 10x now what we were then. And that's not fake, right? The company is incredibly valuable. I think right now because of Starlink, and I think Starlink will, add a 0 probably at least. As we continue to grow the Starlink system. But ultimately, I think Starship will be the thing that takes us over the top as one of the most valuable companies. We can't even envision what Starship is going to do to humanity and humans' lives. And I think that will be the most valuable part of SpaceX. I know I didn't answer what you wanted me to answer, but you knew I wasn't gonna.
So we are an investor in SpaceX. We do have ability to look at the financials of SpaceX. We have made, from the time we started investing in 2017, 7 times our money. We now have investments that are worth $2.8 billion that cost us a little bit over $1 billion over the past 7 years. We continue to invest on every one of their offerings. We think that we're going to triple our money again over the next 5 years, and then we think in the 2030s we can make 5 times again. So we think from current levels, based upon what our projections are, based on the information that we have that's been provided to us, we think that we're going to make 15 times our money again over the next 15 years. Elon believes that our goals are very conservative to his goals, just as an aside.
Thanks so much.